I'm Laura Blumenthal on the Berkshire Heroes podcast, and joining me today is Mick Pollek from the Reading Ukrainian Community Centre. Welcome, Mick.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you for being with me. Now, starting off, what work does the Reading Ukrainian Community Centre do? What are you involved in? What do you support?
Well, the Reading Ukrainian Community Centre was originally put together nearly 45 years ago by our parents who came over here as displaced persons after the Second World War. We've been doing it ever since. Now, of course, before we were just stumbling along from one little event to another, growing up, growing older, community members dying, community members being born. And then the awful war came, or rather this final section of the war, which is now running into the third year, coming up to the fourth. Then we took a really prominent position, because outside of London there are no other Ukrainian community centres. The nearest one is Waltham Cross. So when the war, or the latest version of the war, kicked in, I say that because people think it was 2022. In fact, they started doing this seriously in earnest in 2014, and I'm sure we'll come up to it later on. This has been going on since the Russian Revolution. So Ukraine has been in the sights of whoever runs Moscow to get rid of. So getting back to what we do, then there's obviously a lot of people wanting to know if they could help. I mean, it was quite... February the 24th happens to be my birthday as well. So that's another wonderful present that the Russians have given me. So the second day, there was already flowers being put outside our community centre, which is in the centre of Reading. So we're a group of volunteers. We don't get paid for this, so it's a group of volunteers. We obviously realised there was going to be a cry out for help. Don't forget, this is all before formal discussion or formal announcements were made about potential Ukrainians visiting the country, coming to the country. So initially we thought we'd be a collection point for humanitarian aid, and at the time the call out was to send it all to Poland, because that's where the majority of Ukrainians were trying to get into the EU out of the war zone. About 3 weeks it took us to set something up. And I don't know if you know, people that know Reading, there's a one-way system that goes in from Cemetery Junction past the hospital and next to Kendrick School, and we're down that road. It's a one-way road. Well, we put a call out for help, for blankets, because it's winter, stuff like that. The whole of that part of the town got blocked. In the end, we were actually put a call out for people to come and help us, because cars couldn't park to stop. We were blocking, or people there were blocking the road to try and give us stuff. So we filled the centre with all this aid. Problem is we didn't have the room to sort it. Very early on, Wokingham Borough Council stepped up to the plate and offered us a small place in Winnersh, which used to be the COVID marshals sort of gathering area. So they offered us that, and we're still using it to this day. So items that are brought are sorted and then boxed and sent out.
And how can local people still help Ukrainians here in Berkshire, but also in Ukraine? What can they do to help through the centre?
Right. The best way is to go on to the Reading Ukrainian Community Centre webpage. There is a QR code where we raise cash to buy vehicles, which we then load, and we get drivers to take those vehicles to Ukraine, and it goes to the front line as well. Incidentally, vehicles bought in this country are classed as lucky vehicles because they're right-hand drive, and the Russian drones attack the driver, and they think the driver's on the left, which is quite a horrific thought. But our vehicles are classed as lucky. So what we do is they're a one-way trip. We fill it with medical. At the moment, it's mainly medical aid. We're sending in blankets and stuff like that for the winter. And it's still snow out there, although we're basking in sunshine here. It's still very cold and snow. So we buy the vehicles. The average shelf life of a vehicle in Ukraine is anything between an hour to a month, because they get blown up. They get targeted. Initially, we were a bit foolish and a bit naive. Like I said, we've never done this before. We thought we'd paint the vehicles in a neutral green-grey colour and put a big red cross on the roof. Well, we stopped doing that because that proved to be a target. They were attacking vehicles.
That's
So
horrendous, Mick.
we don't do anything to the vehicles now. We don't want them sticking out from the other vehicles that are around.
How have you come to be involved in the centre? What's been your journey to that?
Well, I was born in 1954. My parents came over here as displaced persons. They were taken by the Nazis as slave labourers. Dad to Austria, Mum to Germany. And they came here when the war finished as refugees. Now, incidentally, we don't. The Ukrainians that have come over here now, they're not refugees. They don't consider themselves as refugees. They consider themselves as visitors. We consider them as visitors because they plan to go back. Now, my mum and dad didn't plan to go back because they didn't see a way out of going back to a country that has been devastated by Moscow. And in fact, they used to say to me as I was growing up, not in your lifetime, maybe in your grandchildren's lifetime, Ukraine will be free and you'll be able to go to Ukraine. Well, I had the fortune to actually be able to go to Ukraine in the 80s. That's before we had our referendum. So my journey is mum and dad settled down. I learned English at school. I went to St James's School in Reading. I couldn't speak English till about 7. And I've been involved in Ukrainian activities and Ukrainian stuff all my life. So I couldn't not do but what I do now.
And I'd be interested to get your view because obviously the war takes up a lot of discussion about Ukraine, but the country's got such rich heritage, incredible architecture. It's contributed so much to Europe and the rest of the world. What do you wish local people knew about Ukraine and its people? What makes it special? What do you most value about it and its population?
The world is missing, or those people that can travel over there are missing so much diversity. Just to give you a bit of background. Kyiv, the capital, was founded in 482. Moscow, as an outpost of the Mongolian Empire, in 1147. We had dealings with the Kievan government, had dealings with Byzantium, Rome, and France. Just before independence referendum, when the Russian Empire, the USSR Empire collapsed, movement was a bit simpler, a bit easier to get there, although it was still quite horrific. You had to queue up for days outside the Russian embassy in London to get your visa to go over there, but things were getting a little bit easier. And then, of course, when the USSR collapsed and we had our independence referendum in 1991, when we declared independence, then it was really easy to go. In fact, to the point that Ryanair had contributed, invested heavily in Lviv airport, which is in western Ukraine. And so they were using it. It was classed as considered to be as the new Vienna of the East. And we were worried at the time, God, I'd love to have that worry now. We were worried at the time that it would just become another booze place, because obviously everything's very cheap in comparison to Western prices, and that Ukraine has got so much more to offer than that. Whether it's in the mountains of the west, in Carpathia, the land is fertile, it's very rich, and hey, as Trump has pointed out, and we've got rare earth minerals. Ukraine was the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. We Ukrainians fed, which is rather ironic. And this will be, perhaps you'll understand why Ukrainians are fighting so viciously to save not just this battle. It's not the battle. It's about maintaining and saving our identity, our culture, and who we are. In 1932, Stalin created a famine, a forced famine that we, the Ukrainians, call the Holodomor. Gareth Jones was a Welsh reporter who reported from Ukraine and brought that news in 1932 to the West of millions of people that died through starvation. So the country that fed the USSR in turn was being starved to death because, and this is why Stalin wanted to punish us, by the way, between 3.5 and 5 million people died as a direct result. He wanted to punish us because when the USSR formed, when the Russian Revolution started and you had the Bolsheviks fighting, Ukraine at that time fought against the Bolsheviks with the other side in order to establish our own identity. Before then, they were serfs, just slaves of Moscow. So Stalin wanted to punish us, which is why today Putin is just saying exactly the same things as Stalin said. He gave instructions to the Russian Orthodox Church to bless the tanks, and their tanks were told to go and rid this land of this vermin. They won't be satisfied until we, as an independent, governed country, stay there. He wants a puppet regime in there, as was evidenced by the guy that they had, which started the Maidan revolution, where we had all the people in Kiev Square, where the Ukrainian government, so that's a puppet of Moscow, shot over 120 peaceful students. So the Orange Revolution, the Maidan, this is just the continuing battle that unfortunately Ukraine and Ukrainians have. He tried to escalate it by saying this is about Ukrainian speakers and Russian speakers, because the Eastern Ukrainians predominantly spoke Russian. That has proven completely wrong, because it's unified and united the country to the point that people now apologise if they have to speak Russian because they didn't learn Ukrainian properly. And one day, when the country is rebuilt and everybody can see the desolation, when the country is rebuilt, it will be a fantastic place to go to. But just over the border from where they got the elements of the Russian control, they are sending drones uh, to attack Ukrainians in Chernobyl, which would mean that if that place got hit, and it's already been reported by the atomic authorities, it would cause massive devastation to Europe. They blew up a dam and flooded Ukraine a couple of years ago that killed thousands. They've taken over 1 million of our children from the occupied territories to Moscow, given them to, fostered them out, told the kids that the reason they were taken was for their own protection because their parents, who are all Nazis, didn't want them. And they're being groomed to then, when they're of an age, then they're sent off to fight. It's a war crime.
All of this information, Mick, I don't feel really finds its way into the mainstream media. It all seems to be quite surface level when it's reporting on the war. Are there any journalists, media outlets, social media accounts that you would really recommend people to follow if they do want the depth of the historical context and also the human element of this news?
If you're able to speak Ukrainian, obviously that'll be a lot easier. If you go to the Channel 5 in Kiev, but there's, by the way, I'll send you her details. She speaks English very well. Her name's Nonna Stefanova. She's one of the main reporters. It's 24/7 news coming out of Ukraine. In fact, because of smartphones, the men and women, there are hardly any men here. They're women and children because they've come out when the war started. They've got their smartphones. Their husbands, brothers, uncles, fathers are all fighting. And they are sending stuff to their wives because they want to make sure that this is sent to the West to show the atrocities. Some of the things I've seen cannot be unseen once you've seen it, and they are absolutely horrendous. Paul Mason, he's a British journalist. He's been to Ukraine several times. He's our honorary chairman. He grew up in Reading with me. He's the same age as me, although much more handsome. His name is Mick Mikhailo Antonio. He's Welsh AM. He used to be Wales's Solicitor General. He single-handedly has arranged over 30 vehicles to go to Ukraine. He's been working closely with the Welsh miners. This is rather poignant. During the Thatcher strike, when the miners were on strike, Ukrainian miners sent food parcels to Wales as an act of solidarity. The Welsh miners are reciprocating by sending medical aid and food parcels back to those miners in Ukraine.
And how are the Ukrainians that you're supporting doing at the moment? What's morale like? Are they getting the support they need to find housing, find employment?
When they first came over here, they were in a state of shock. They literally were here with what they could put in a bag and carry it out. It was a horrendous journey here. Whilst I have no overall criticism about what the UK government eventually did, what didn't help was the Brexit vote, because there was far better movement across Europe, and the biggest problem they had was trying to get into this country. And by the way, we had problems trying to get vehicles out of this country into Europe. It was okay in Europe. I'm talking about aid. We had refrigerated vehicles that were stuck on the Dover border because we couldn't get the paperwork sorted out. Well, then that eventually, when it became under the Levelling Up Department, became a little bit more organised and a bit more fluid. But we had situations in the early days where a mother would have a visa and her son wouldn't, or her daughter wouldn't, or vice versa. And there was no rhyme or reason as to why. So in the early days, the Home Office would come to our Reading Centre, and we would have, where necessary, private consultation. I've got to say at this point, Reading Borough Council were absolutely terrific too. They set up a special place above the library in the town centre where Ukrainians could come and get their biometrics sorted out and actually then talk about what it is that they need to do to get by living in the Reading area. So housing, dentists, doctors, schools. Don't forget, this is a language that they don't know. A lot of them could speak English, but in the early days, it was a bit traumatic. I was walking with some children, some women who asked to meet with us, and we went to walk in the Forbury. So I thought they'd just have a bit of pleasant surrounding and see how Reading can be nice. And a helicopter flew over, and the kid dropped to the ground, crying, petrified, thought being attacked. The November bonfire celebrations was horrendous because for them, fireworks isn't a pleasurable thing. It's a rocket blast, it's the bombing, it's the drones and so on. Now we moved on, they're 3 years on, they've learnt a lot of English, they are very, very autonomous, they've got work where they can. Some of the problems that we have that they face is that the visa scheme, because there were two lots of schemes, there was friends and family, which didn't attract a subsidy, or there was Homes for Ukrainians, which did. And so we had two schemes running in tandem that didn't talk to each other, and that some group of people were getting money and others weren't. Some people that were helping Ukrainians were getting paid and others weren't. And unfortunately, as always is the case. And then there were people that were using it as an opportunity to make money. I mean, we had one young lady come to the centre say that, is it right that her host has said that she can't lock her door because it's a fire hazard? We've had people come to our centre asking, have we got any women between the ages of 20 and 30 they could have for home help? And we've
How horrendous, Mick.
told them to go away. Now, you see, the Homes for Ukrainians are supposed to be DBS checked. The council was supposed to go around, and I know Reading Borough did, but not all councils acted the same. And I won't name the councils, I don't want to shame them, but councils bordering us, and it's not Wokingham Borough Council, but other councils bordering us, didn't do the same level of assistance that certainly Wokingham and Reading did, to the point that people that lived in the other council area were coming to us for help. And whilst we could help in the short term, unfortunately, we had to direct them back to their own council, because that's who were obliged. Because you see, councils were given money to help, but not told what to do, not told how to spend. So some didn't put the money that they should have done where it should have gone. And the problem we've got now is, of course, is that the scheme, the visas are drying up. They are being extended, but they're being extended short bursts. And if you want to rent an accommodation, you've got to supply a visa that's got a bit of a shelf life, and you can't rent anywhere. The rents have gone up astronomically, where people are making money out of this. So it is difficult. But look, Reading, because the Reading Refugee Centre has been very helpful with us. But then Nick Harborne down there, he's been a fantastic aid. But he's got such an onerous task, because it was people from Hong Kong, it was Afghanis, and there's one of the things about Reading is it's definitely a multicultural, multilingual, multicultural area, and it is a city of sanctuary, and a lot of people have settled here. And in all honesty, and although I was born here, and I suppose I would say that, wouldn't I? But compared to other areas in the country, Reading is a friendly place to foreigners. Certainly, the Reading people can't be faulted for their help and aid. Royal Berks Hospital sent us, who knew there's a use by date on a plaster? Reading Royal Berks Hospital has sent us, or we collect on a regular basis for the last 3 years now, tourniquets, needles, sharps, any humanitarian medical aid that we send to, and it's a hospital in western Ukraine, in Zolochiv, where we send that aid to. We send some stuff to the front, but it's a drop in the ocean, so we thought we'd concentrate on one specific area. So the places that said Zolochiv, it's a place half the size of Reading. There's an orphanage there. 3 years ago, we sent our first load of brand new toys to the orphanage. At that time, there was only about 80 kids in the orphanage. It's doubled now because there's been fatalities. Now, although it's away from the front line, it's still in the war zone. The whole of Ukraine is a war zone. So we've been sending continuously vehicles to this orphanage, and we got some fantastic footage been sent back of kids unloading the vehicles and enjoying themselves, as well as horrendous footage of their car park being bombed by a drone because there's a power station nearby.
And Mick, how realistic do you think it is for the Ukrainian visitors to return to Ukraine once the war is over? Because, as you said, a lot of it is absolutely decimated, and a lot of them will be very scared to go back.
No, they'll go back to rebuild. Look, their husbands, their brothers, their fathers, their uncles, if they're still alive, that's where they'll be. Families don't want to be split for the sake of it. The only way they would stay here would be if the menfolk could come out. And whilst there's a war on, the men are not going to come out. In fact, we've got draft dodgers hiding around here. And one child said to his mum, and it made me cry because I didn't know how the hell she managed to answer it. How come that boy's dad's here and mine isn't? It's the unspoken elephant in the room amongst the communities. They will go back, providing we have a proper government. You see, since there's been a change in the White House, Trump insisting that we go to the negotiating table, that's fine if you've got people negotiating in good faith. 1991, there was a Budapest memorandum where Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal on the understanding that Ukrainian territory, Ukrainian border will be sacrosanct. The signatories to that agreement was Yeltsin, Major, America, France. There was a memorandum of understanding that China signed up to. And we gave up our nuclear weapons because we didn't need them, because we're not going to use them, so why have them? Some are saying now that was a mistake. Russia wouldn't have invaded us had we had our nuclear weapons. I still don't think it was a mistake, because it's unconscionable to the thought that if we were to use our weapons to stop that invasion, then there would be indeed a Third World War. But they will go back, providing there is a proper government. Now, Putin wants Zelensky gone because he wants to put his own puppet in there to be able to control Ukraine. That won't happen. The Ukrainian people won't let that happen. If there will be mass carnage if somehow America forces Ukraine to capitulate. So I know it's doom and gloom. So this is why the morale over here is really, really awful, since especially that awful escapade where they attacked Zelensky in the White House. Absolutely appalling. Whilst the morale is low, the spirits are high. The sense of camaraderie. For instance, 3 weeks ago, students before their Easter break from Reading University, two-thirds of them are Ukrainians, youngsters, came down to our centre with some Estonians, Latvian, Georgians, and they had a fantastic evening. And what surprised me very much, because they had brought their own music and we allowed them to play it. I don't like rap much, and I was expecting that. However, there was some of it. But oh my God, there were songs from the 30s, songs that I'd forgotten that I knew, that have been resurrected, because these are the songs of our culture, of who we are and what we are. And these youngsters have embraced that. There's a film called Butcher, which is a place. I'll send you details of that.
Thank you.
Laura, it's we may be doing a showing of it. We had a discussion about that. I don't think many Ukrainians, if any, will come to watch it because it's live as it happens. The destruction of an area in Bucha, just outside Kyiv, where thousands of civilians were killed. It's a documentary. It's not been done by Ukrainians. Although it's been done in collaboration with. So we're looking at having a showing at a centre, but people such as yourselves, they're subtitled, so I can't watch it.
You send me that, and I'll publicize it on the channels.
I'll send you.
It would be
details.
really good to know, Mick, what is it that you're really focusing on at the centre at the moment, and how can people find out more about the centre online if they'd like to help?
If they go to Reading Ukrainian Community Centre, put that into the search, and we come up, and then in there there's got the QR codes for the donations and the like. We also publicise any activities that we're going to do there. We've got several WhatsApp groups where the people talk amongst themselves about setting up. We've got a big school. There used to be, before this latest onslaught, we had about 30 kids come to our school in our centre. Now, with the influx of new children that have come over, Reading Boys School have been phenomenal because they've found a home over there. They've got 4 classes over there that ranges from 6 to 14 to 15. They've done concerts at the Minster. We've got a choir called Malva. And if you go on to the Reading Borough Council events page, there's a thing called Waterfest, which happens every year. The Ukrainians, and these are all people that have come here as a result of a war, who 4 years ago didn't know each other. So we got the choir going, we've got some artists playing, and we'll be there with our Ukrainian beer as an apocryphal thing, but it's very, very true. When the war kicked off, when they knew they were going to come, there's a big brewery just outside Kyiv called Obolon. Fantastic beer. They had literally 1.5 million bottles, empty bottles. They printed a special label. On that label, written in Russian, was "Enjoy, have a drink with us." And they filled it with petrol, gave it to the local defenders to defend Kyiv. And that's why the Russians never could get into Kyiv when they advanced. So anybody could get a label. That'd be worth quite a bit of money because obviously the bottles were used. We've got a cafe there that opens on a Wednesday and a Saturday from 1 o'clock onwards. There's a library at the centre with both Ukrainian and English books. We're open to everybody in the community, English speaking, Ukrainian speaking. All languages are accepted. We'd rather people didn't speak in Russian. However, we won't turn anybody away.
And final question, Mick. If you were Prime Minister, which law would you introduce or change, and why?
But the only thing that I would do, which means that I wouldn't be prime minister for long, I would make Ukrainians have the legal right to remain. Therefore, they would be able to find work. They would come off of any kind of social service payments. They would be able to find proper housing, proper accommodation because of the elements there. But you see, the world is facing so many troubles. You had all this horror in Gaza with the Palestinians, and then you had the earthquake. There's always going to be something that's going to knock Ukraine off the front page. And I hate being on the front page because it's never good news. Never good news. The Ukrainians are here, scared if the phone doesn't ring and panic when it does. So there is possible to travel. And in fact, I was thinking about at my age to try and perhaps go over there with a vehicle or not, but I think I'll be a bigger liability than an asset. But yeah, that's what I would change to make it easier for Ukrainians to stay. And I apologise to all my other cousins, brothers, and sisters who are not Ukrainians for saying Ukrainians should stay.
No, not at all. Thank you for all your hard work that you're doing, Mick. It's important that this is kept on the front page. Thank you, Mick Pollek, for joining me on the Berkshire Heroes podcast. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you very much, Laura.